I've got 20 minutes to talk about men without starting a gender war. Someone said the war between the genders will never be won. There's too much fraternising with the enemy. My journey with men started about 25 years ago. Love the reference to Carl Jung. My basic therapy training was with Jungian therapy. And I was looking around the world as we do and look back through history from our school days and looking at all the things that control the world now and the institutions that are created that control the world have all the power. And of course, you look around it and it's men. Men have controlled the world for about the last 5,000 years, and the institutions they created still do to many extent. So men are part of a problem, and I'm here to tell you that men are a really big part of the solution. I began the journey through something called mythopoetics with the great poet Robert Bly. And the idea being that one of the differences, and there are many differences between men and women, is in the brain. Did you know that? We talk about the left brain being the logical, linear, directive, rational part of ourselves, and the right brain being the more emotional access, the more imaginative content. And apparently, in a woman's brain, the link between the two, which is known as the corpus callosum, the sort of the bridge, is like a 6-lane highway. You know, it flows very freely. On a man, I'm sorry to say, it's like a badly lit alleyway at night with a lot of puddles. And I can remember people saying to me, or women saying to me, "How are you feeling?" I said, "What do you mean?" "How are you feeling?" "I feel like a drink," you know. There's a sadness in there, you know, there's a sadness in there. And the whole idea of, I love Mark's talking about the social isolation of men and depression. And one of the things that the Mankind Project do, and all of I'm not just here to talk about the Mankind Project, or I can, if men getting together, is that, first of all, it's a place of emotional expression. And we have, for thousands of years, been taught to be numb. We've been schooled to be numb in all of the public schools and the imperial schools, army, military schools, because you've got to kill. And when you kill, you can't be having a conscience or thinking about how you feel about it. Just kill it, otherwise you're dead. You know, that evolution has made that in us. And now we're trying to break the spell. Because we're looking around the world now and look at all the bad things that are happening in the world. There's not a lot of women involved. It's the truth. There's not. But the hope is that men actually coming together, working together in collaboration and beginning to learn to trust each other. Because one of the things I learned as a man, I don't know about the rest of you men in the room, is that I needed to know where I fitted, where the hierarchy was, there's a competition element that's built into men. You know, we have to sort of work out where we stack up. I've worked a lot with youngsters who are coming in and out of prison, and I see it very quickly. Pecking orders develop, and it usually forms somebody at the top, particularly in a short run, is the psychopath. Usually becomes the leader. Yeah, the one who's most ruthless, who's able to just make quick decisions and not care about anybody. He gets followed because we're frightened of him. He gets followed. So one of the things that I want to talk about in this, I just want to give you a couple of images. Because in the mythopoetic world, we're into the right brain. We're into the imaginative and the emotional world. The world that poets and prophets have been telling us existed for thousands of years. And I never really went there until Robert Bly, bless him, the poet, took me there. And I've been sort of dwelling around there ever since. So that's the world of images and stories. And here's a little story. It's snowing hard enough that the taxis aren't running. I'm walking home long after midnight with the whole city to myself, when across the street I see a very young American sailor who's standing over a girl and yelling at her to tell him where she lives so he can take her there before they both freeze. The pair of them are drunk. My guess is he picked her up in a bar somewhere, and at first it was great at playing an old salt at liberty in a port full of women with hinges on their heels. But by now he wants only to find a solution to the infinitely complex problem of what to do about her before they fall into the hands of the police or the shore patrol. And what keeps this from being squalid is what's happening for him on the inside. If there were other sailors here, it would be possible for him to abandon her where she is and joke about it later. But he is alone. And the guilt cannot be divided into small, forgettable pieces. He's finding out what it means to be a man and how very different it is from the way that only hours ago he imagined it to be. So that's the great poet just pinpointing that moment when a responsibility kicks in. And our ancestors, I love the talk we had this morning from Phil, talking about our indigenous ancestors. They knew lots of things that we've forgotten. And one of the things that they knew is there would be a point in a young man's life where, everything would change. And we know it as testosterone kicking in and puberty and all that sort of stuff. They just observed it. And they knew it was time for him to leave his mother and to go out with the men and to learn responsibility, to learn the first lesson is that you are ordinary. Your ego is not the center of the world. What a lesson that is, eh? Wow. And then the second lesson they got was you are extraordinary. You have extraordinary gifts that only you have, that we need you to serve us with. And that the great Carl Jung called that the bestowing self, the soul's gift. So those are the notions that we work with in the men's work, the Men's Kind Project does. And I want to just offer you a couple of images around that moment of initiation. Initiation's a funny word, we've got to be careful with that. It conjures up all kinds of ideas of secret sects and all those society things, but really it meant to begin something. And it was an intense experience where these young men were met, their energy was met, it was defeated and blessed by a benign force. You're okay, you're one of us, and we will survive. And you've left your mother now, and you've met the big mother, who we have to have a reciprocal relationship with if we're to survive. So your own relationship with your real mother now changes. You've got a different kind of respect. You've got a different kind of grown-up reciprocal attitude to her. And of course, we've lost that a long time ago, and there are lots of reasons why we've lost that whole idea of the rites of passage for puberty. And there are lots of consequences to the loss of it too. Haven't got time to go into them. But we live basically now in a pathologically adolescent society. No one really knows when they're grown up, particularly men. We don't know when we're grown up. Women, the moment that you knew you were grown up, do you know when it was? It's hard to tell. It usually involves some hit, some hurt, some divorce, a death, disease, something where you were impacted. And that's an initiatory moment. That's an initiatory moment. And as we say, there's three possible responses to an initiatory moment for a man. One is to pretend it never happened, get back on the horse and just carry on, which is a popular choice. The second one is to fall apart and life is over now. The third one is to understand the meaning of it. What does this mean for me? What does it mean for me, my soul, my core self of who I am in this world, and what am I doing? So I want to just basically, in order to take the heat out of the men-women thing, I want to posit what Jung called archetypal energies in human beings. One of them is a masculine energy. And we all know what that does. It's a force-driven energy, it's focused, it hunts, it solves solutions, it's heroic. And it achieves the great things, and many great things have been achieved in progress over many hundreds and thousands of years through that energy. And our whole civilization has often been, the civilized world has been based upon that energy, making things happen. And there's a feminine energy. And the feminine energy is really about caring, nurturing, relationship, connectedness, community, all the things that have been talked about today. And evolution has kind of embodied those in men and women, but now things are changing. We've noticed after the last 40, 50 years that women are embodying their masculine energy. And they are becoming more complete. Perhaps it was easier for them to do that. But we can all feel those energies in us. So now that men and women are both trying to integrate empowered versions of the masculine and feminine within themselves. It's what Jung called the inner marriage. Unfortunately, men accessing their feminine energy, it doesn't feel too attractive, It feels like, whoa, if I go in there, I'm never going to get out alive, It's all full of feelings, I don't like feelings, and I'd rather stay out here. So the whole idea of the men accessing their feminine is initially fraught with challenge. Okay. So the masculine energy has a tendency to be obsessive and excessive. You ever noticed that? No? Anyone ever noticed that about men? Sometimes they can get a bit obsessive and excessive. And that was the energy that our ancestors knew they had to temper with the initiatory work. And that energy, when it's interacting with each other, that masculine energy, it forms pecking orders, it forms hierarchies, and it forms these things, pyramids. And these pyramids run the world. They run the pharmaceutical industry, they run the NHS, they run the banks, they run the religions, you name it, that's the organizational structure. And it works very well, and we have a lot to answer for it. When you're in a desperate situation and you've got war or scarcity, anything like that, you need a pyramid, clear line of control, make it happen, and it's effective. Unfortunately, it can be used as an excuse for continual war because we need this sort of situation. But what else? Think about the individuals in a pyramid. We've all been in pyramids. What does it feel like to be in a pyramid? Where are you in the pyramid? You're looking down at maybe quite a lot of people, looking up at a few others. You know your place, don't you? People ask you what you do. They don't ask you who you are. Any space for emotional expression in a pyramid? Not a lot. The whole thing is controlled by threat of exile, maybe even force, violence if necessary. What else about pyramids? It's compartmentalized, so you know what's happening maybe on your level, but you're not quite sure about the level above, and as for the level above that, or above that, or above that. And these shapes have been used as dehumanizing shapes for a long time. It's easy to be stuck in a pyramid and just be a function, be a mechanism. But as for meaning, soul and purpose, which we looked at early on, it doesn't happen in pyramids. It's a place of function. D.H. Lawrence, the great English writer, went through a depression in his life, great writer. Here's what he had to say. I'm not a mechanism. I'm not a mechanism. An assembly of various sections, and it is not because the mechanism is working wrongly that I am ill. I am ill because of wounds to the soul, to the deep emotional self. And wounds to the soul take a long time, and only time and patience can help, and a certain difficult repentance and realization of life's mistake, and the freeing myself from the endless repetition of the mistake that mankind at large has chosen to sanctify. So the feminine shape, the shape that the feminine brings, hang on, and we're here, it's coming looking like that. It's more a nature's shape. And when I walk into a circle like that, it's a very different feeling because I'm looking at everybody else and we're all on the same level and we're all included. And it's the shape that naturally friends coming together in nature form. It's the shape where some of the cultures in society, looking back, the most extant ones being the Native Americans, before that the Celts, they had a different relationship to the feminine, much more balanced than we've developed. And they used to use this shape a lot. And when I'm in the circle, how does it feel to be in the circle? A bit scary, because I'm exposed. It's a transparency, I'm open. But I'm with others. Yeah? We're on the same level. We could really do something here. If we learn to trust, can we learn to trust each other here? For men, this is a challenge to be in a circle. You can imagine, can't you? Who's in charge here? What are the rules? What's he going to do about it when I break them? All that stuff, But circles are what Mankind Project provide. That's what Band of Brothers is. Band of Brothers is literally a circle of men. A circle of men that hold younger men, and the younger men stand in the middle of the circle. And when we tell them when they can stand in that circle and they can look all the other men in their eyes and they can speak from their heart, they've made it. They're there. You're in. There's no going back now. Yeah. So that's the shape that the Mankind Project and many other organisations promote in a sense. We're moving all the time from pyramids to circles. I mean, all great sports teams, for instance, have elements of both pyramids and circles. You know, you really need good strategy, organisation, everything else, but you also need, you know, great camaraderie and trust and everything else. But in the circle, for men, it's a place of emotional expression. And when we talk about depression, there are three things that I've found that are antidotes to depression. And you know, we've heard about how all the figures are around male suicide, male depression, male violence. You know, it's either violence to myself or violence outside, suppression of women and all that. And what's causing that? Well, the first one is lack of emotional expression. The only thing it's really okay for a man to be is angry. So fear, grief, frustration, shame, it all looks like anger, because that's the only acceptable thing you can do to be a man. Yeah? Emotional expression, a connection with others. So I walk into that circle and I tell them how I'm feeling, and then another guy puts his hand out, he says, me too. And another puts his hand out, he says, me too. And I thought it was just me. My social isolation is suddenly broken. I'm with another guy, he says, you feel shame like you're not good enough? I had a really not good enough running in me for a long time. Don't know anyone else. That's a very popular one, by the way. And suddenly I met these other guys who weren't good enough, and we were all not good enough together, and it was great. And I wasn't, and then I had I'm not worthy, which is great. Now, if you look around the room and ask anyone, pick someone else who's not worthy, you can't do it. It's impossible. So this was great. You know, I was suddenly liberated emotionally that it was okay to be raging mad about something and break something, as long as I didn't hurt anybody or myself. Why not? That's where those young men who we work with come. They come in loaded with anger, and we just tell them, okay, just do it. Let's see it. Is that it? You know, come on. Because you know, Jung used to say that individuation, that means becoming who you really are, begins with Mars. It begins with begins with anger. What are you angry about? And you've got dead right to be angry. And a lot of these youngsters have been told they're not okay to be angry. Don't be angry here, go be angry somewhere else. Anywhere else, but not here. So emotional expression, connection with others, where you have a real soul connection. There's a great thing with men talking about football and you know, commerce and everything else. I love all that stuff, but there's no soul in it. There's a much deeper connection in the circle. And finally, of course, meaningful collaborative action. What we do at the Mankind Project is they work together to create the space, so 50 men might hold a space, for 40 strangers they never met to show up, to step into the circle, so that they can do their, what we call hero's journey, to find out who they are. So it's our kind of contemporary, appropriate, initiatory rites of passage experience that is set up. You know, it's not perfect, but it's been going for 30 years. It works well enough, and many men have said it marks the beginning of the end of something and the beginning of something new. And when we look around the world, we know we're at the end of a story. We know all these institutions are cracking at the seams. We know it's not working anymore. And we know that the power structures are going to be the last to want to go because they've got most to lose. We know that. But we haven't really started the new story yet. We're kind of in between stories. We know what isn't working anymore, and we know the same old is not going to serve our grandchildren. But we're not quite sure what the new story is yet. We're in between stories. And I'm here to tell you that I don't know, other than the fact I know a rebalancing is part of that story. A rebalancing of the masculine and feminine in me, in each one of us, and collectively, and in our institutions and in the way we operate. And as Mark was saying, you know, that the circle is a place of community. Community has to be a big word in the future creation of what we got. We've got to start using pyramids, okay, but pyramids that are accountable to circles. in the old Native American tradition, it was the grandmothers who chose the chieftains. Can you imagine that? Imagine that. Anyhow, I'm here to just tell you a little bit about the men, and that's where we are. So that's where I want to leave the last word to a woman, if I can. Is that okay? This is every man in this room who's a son or a father knows that kind of heart energy. And one of the things that happens in the circles is men listen with their hearts, they speak with their hearts, and there's a resonance in hearts. And now we know through science, just in case you're left-brained enough to want it proven to you, through something called the Heart Math Institute, that this thing here inside our chest is not just a pump. It has neurons in it. It thinks for itself. It has a frequency that connects with other hearts. And actually, this is the instrument that connects us, and this is the one that separates us. So we all know what it feels to be in our hearts with our families, but now it's a bigger picture now. We need to be able to think about bringing that same heartfelt energy into our pyramids, into our work, into connections, and actually those old stories of how men should be, we're gradually breaking them down. Anyhow, this is a woman poet called Naomi Shihab Nye, and this is one I want to leave you with. And thank you for your generous attention to my ramblings. This is called Shoulders. A man crosses the street in the rain, stepping gently, looking 2 times north and south, because his son is asleep on his shoulder. No car must splash him. No car drive too near his shadow. The man carries the world's most sensitive cargo, but he's not marked. Nowhere does his jacket say, fragile, handle with care. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. The road will only be wide, and the rain will never stop falling. Thank you.